You're watching Pyro Media Network.
We just keep on walking, but never really getting nowhere. It's like we keep on talking, but never really saying nothing. On different sides, on different times, stuck in a ways we ain't changing. Can't read your mind, and I've really tried. You won't let me in like we're strangers. Say opposites, supposed to attract, but we both can tell it feels often. Should let it go, but somehow we're folding. It happens way too often. We're so different, we're so different. How can we ever agree? Make me fit in. It's just like we're so different, we're so different. I don't quite understand you.
Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We hope your experience is fruitful. Please feel free to visit our website to find out how you can join our growing family. While we are loading your experience, please do us a quick favor and hit that like button from whichever platform you're watching or listening on. Also, share so others may enjoy as well. And we hope you would consider hitting that subscribe or follow button so you can check out more of our amazing content. All right, let's start the show.
Have you ever tried to set boundaries with someone? Have you ever tried to put up boundaries around your giving, around your caring, around your heart, around your time, and simply putting up boundaries made you the villain? Well, sometimes you got to be okay being the villain in somebody's story, and that's what we're going to talk about in tonight's show. Welcome to Tammy Take. Let's start the show. Hi, and welcome back to Tammy's Take. I am so happy that you are here for a second show. Yay, us! Woo, woo. Okay, so today's show is going to be about learning to be okay with being the villain in somebody's story. Now, when I say that, I'm not taking away from the fact that sometimes we do things and behave in ways that make us the villain. But sometimes simply setting boundaries around our time, around our gift, around our talent, around our heart, around our expertise will make you the villain in somebody else's story. And when that happens, you have to be okay with being the villain. Now, if you grew up like me, and most of us, particularly if you're a Gen X or even some of us as millennials, if you grew up in a time where you were to be seen and not to be heard, and you were supposed to be nice and kind and charitable, and might I say empathetic, because sometimes that gets weaponized against us too. But if you grew up in a time where you were taught to be kind, to be giving, to serve, to care, right? You're being taught that. And it's okay to be all of those things. But what happens when people start abusing your kindness, abusing your giving, abusing your gift, abusing your talent? What happens when you decide enough? Does it make me less empathetic? Does it make me less kind? Does it make me less giving? Well, what I've decided to do was stop allowing people, and sometimes those people look different. Sometimes those people are our family. Sometimes those people are our church family. Sometimes those people are our friends. Sometimes those people are the people we work with. What happens when you decide to stop allowing people to abuse you? When that happens, you are going to be the villain. You're going to be the villain in that story. And that story is going to look something like, all of a sudden, she couldn't do it anymore. All of a sudden, he couldn't do it anymore. All of a sudden, she got too big. Her head got too big. His head got too big. All of a sudden, he thought he was bigger than the program. All of a sudden, he wasn't as kind as everybody thought he was. She wasn't as nice as everybody believed she was. All of a sudden, you have become the villain. And the only thing you've done to become the villain is set boundaries around yourself. One of the things that I talk about in my space, one of the things I teach as a part of my consultancy and my business is that empathy without boundaries will get you abused. We have been socialized to believe that our empathy must be without boundary, boundless. That people can say anything, people can do anything, and people can abuse us. And we're supposed to be okay. Now, the second thing that makes us get abused in relationships, whether that is a relationship with a partner, whether that's relationship at work, relationship with friends, is if you were raised within the Christian faith or Christian denomination, and double if you were raised as a Black Christian. A lot of what we are taught as Black Christians is that we are to sacrifice and to offer our gifts and our talents. Although we're doing it for a church that is tax exempt, might I add, although we're doing it for a church, we're not really doing it for the church, we're doing it for the Lord. And so then people get manipulated into spending more time, more money, more of their gifts, and more of their talent in these spaces because the Lord requires that of you. Why wouldn't you serve the Lord? Isn't this the way for you to serve the Lord? And whenever Christians, because I'm not saying that you're not a Christian, you could very much be a Christian, but when Christians decide that the Lord doesn't need money, he's God, he doesn't need my money. So I don't have to give to the building fund this month because I ain't got it. The Lord doesn't need me to be tired and burnt out because I'm working more hours at the church than I'm working in my house, that I'm working in my business, the business that actually pays the bill. That the Lord doesn't need that from me. He's God. He doesn't need that from me. The people, the ministry needs that from me. And the ministry is weaponizing my faith and my belief and my love of God against me. And the day that I decide I can't do that anymore, I can give you 1 hour of my time. I can't give you 3. Then all of a sudden, you're the villain. And you have to be okay with that. Now, the second reason why you may be the villain in somebody's story is because you are actually the villain. You actually did what they said you did. You actually did the thing that people said you did. Now, if you did the thing and you have no apologies about doing the thing, then it's okay for you to be the villain because you did what they said you did. Now, sometimes what you did could have been the old version of you, right? Before you knew better, the saying, when you know better, you do better. So before you knew better, you were in fact the person that lied. You were in fact the person that cheated. You were in fact the person that was difficult to be around. You were in fact the person that was argumentative. You were, in fact, the person that was selfish, right? And now you have grown, evolved, and you are not that person anymore. But the person who has casted you as the villain in their story only remembers the person who is, in fact, the villain. You have to be okay with being the villain in their story. We spend a lot of time trying to convince people that we are different, that we're no longer those people. But the truth is, depending on why you are the villain in somebody's story and what level of hurt you have caused them, you will forever be the villain. You will forever be the villain. Now, some of you on YouTube may be also on TikTok, right? And if you're on TikTok, you're probably following the drama of Brene and Devin and Tim. And if you don't know who those people are, count yourself lucky. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of who these people are. So Brene was married to Devin. Devin was best friends with Tim. And Brene was friends with Tim's wife, whose name is Akira. Brene decided to divorce Devin because she was having an affair with Tim, Devin's friend, and her friend, Akira's husband. Now, obviously, Brene is the villain in this story. Now, the thing about that story with Brene, if you follow her, you don't know her, she's unapologetic about being the villain. She knows she's the villain and she doesn't try to pretend that she's not. Now, Brene is young. She's 26. Now, Brene is probably going to be a different woman and a different person by the time she gets to be 36, 46 even, 56. So let's say Brene is looking at her life and she's now 36 and she's looking back at 26-year-old Brene. And not that she's looking back at herself, but the internet has a record. She's left a footprint of who she was and who she is currently at 26. So when 36-year-old Brene looks back at her life, and she's no longer the villain, she's grown. She feels terrible for the lives that she has ruined by her actions. Ending her marriage, breaking her husband's heart, betraying her girlfriend that she was friends with, and being with a man who didn't have the moral fortitude or moral character to not cheat with her as well, because that's the man you're getting, right? Like if you make the decision to cheat with him and he makes the decision to cheat with you, you have to understand the kind of man that you're getting in the way that he has to understand the kind of woman he's getting, right? Well, let's just say at 36, she realizes all of her mistakes. She is regretful of the woman she was when she was 26. She may forever be the villain for Akira. She may forever be the villain for Devin. And nothing she says, nothing she does will change that fact for them. And if nothing she says and nothing she does changes that fact for them, she then has to be okay being the villain in their story. But you can't allow, if you are the villain in somebody's story, you cannot allow their view of you or people holding on to the view of you stop you from being the better or best version of yourself. But if you are so caught up in wanting to prove to people that you aren't a villain or are no longer a villain, you stop living your life. And so you have to be okay with being the villain. You have to be okay with being the listen. There are people who have experienced me throughout my 47 years floating around this rock called Earth, the planet. And some people who have met me, encountered me, have been engaged with me will tell you that I am the nicest person, although I don't categorize myself as nice because I think nice is fake. But we understand how people use language. We'll say, I met Tammy. I've worked with Tammy. I've known Tammy for 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, 18 years, however long people have known me. I find her to be the kindest, the nicest, most giving, most compassionate, most empathetic person I know. Smart, intelligent, all the things. And you may meet somebody else who says, oh, I know her. Don't like her. Why? Don't know, just don't like her. Oh, I know her. I don't like her, and I have good reason to not like her. In their story, I am the villain. And in some people's story, I have been the villain. And I think when you are afraid to be the villain, you're not honest with yourselves. You're not honest. You have been the villain in some people's story. Some people aren't simply calling you the villain because you're setting boundaries. You have actually been the villain. And if you have, right now, if you are happy in that role, because some people love being the villain. I don't like being the villain in anybody's story, but I understand that I have engaged in behaviors that have made me the villain in some people's stories. And I understand that based on boundaries that I've set around myself, people have made me the villain in their stories. Both of those things are true. But who I was at 20, who I was at 30, hell, who I was at 40, is very different than the woman I am at 47. But just because I have changed does not mean the people that I was not good to, the people that I have hurt, and the people that I have harmed, doesn't mean that they have to change their view of me and their opinion of me. And so sometimes I encounter people for whom I have been the villain. And I have made peace with the fact that I am the villain in their story. And you're going to have to make peace with the fact that in some people's stories, you are absolutely the villain. And there's nothing you can do. You can win the Nobel Peace Prize. You can be sitting down talking to Oprah and Gail. You can be on Good Morning America. You could do with your life all the wonderful things. That person will hold on to the person you were to them. And again, if you haven't done anything to make yourself the villain, which I find that hard to believe, because I don't think that you can live a life and not be the villain in at least one or two people's story. I mean, we like to think about ourselves as good people. I think I'm a balanced human. I don't like to call myself a good person or a bad person or mean person or a kind person. I think I'm balanced. Depending on who I'm dealing with and what I'm dealing with, you may get a version of me that's very kind, empathetic, and sweet, or you may get a version of me who's very aloof, very standoff, very not interested. And for some people, that's not a person they want to be around. But if you're the villain because you have set boundaries around yourself, get comfortable with that. Because that discomfort you're feeling is you taking agency over your talent, over your time, over your gift, over your life. You're not allowing other people to decide for you what you will do with your talent, your gifts, your time, or your life. You're setting boundaries around that. And when you start to do that, that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Because we know how people do. Oh my God, she thinks she's it now. Oh my God, she's on YouTube. Oh my God, she's on TikTok. Oh my God, she's doing this. Oh my God, she just thinks she's all that. That's okay. That's okay. The answer is still no. You cannot borrow my car. And that's okay. The answer is still no. I cannot lend you $1,000 because what I can't afford to give away, I can't afford to lend. The answer is still no. And you can have all the opinions about me. The answer is still no. And the only people who struggle with boundaries when it comes to life, when it comes to living, are the people who are afraid of being the villain. And so my question to you is, why are you afraid of being the villain? What will happen? Let's do a thought exercise here. What will happen if you said no? What will happen if you said you can't? What will happen if you say you can't do the thing? You can't lend the money. You can't show up. You can't be the bridesmaid. You can't go on the trip. You can't babysit. You can't do the thing. What will happen? And if the people you say no to don't recognize your boundaries, don't respect your boundaries, those people don't respect you. And you will always be the villain as long as you say no. And that could be no to anything. So what are you afraid of? What is so scary about being the villain? This is a question that I ask people all the time because I have made peace with being the villain. I have made peace that I have been the villain. If you're running away from being the villain, why? Why are you afraid of being the villain? Why are you afraid of being the villain? What is so scary about the thought of saying no? I can't. I don't want to. I'm not interested. What is so scary about that? I want you to think about that. What scares you about somebody else making you the villain? I mean, we live in a culture, we live in a society, right? The people who make it are the people who are not afraid of you calling them the villain. They don't care that you call them racist. They don't care that you call them homophobic. They don't care that you call them anti-Semitic, Islamophobic. They don't care. If the thing that they want to do is about maintaining their boundaries, they don't care. So if they don't care and life doesn't stop for them, has life stopped for Elon Musk? Elon Musk has been the villain in every lifetime I've been in. And somehow he still manages to be a billionaire. He still manages to have the influence that he has in our politics, in our world, in our culture. He still manages, I don't know how, to attract women. He still manages to keep, and I use the term loosely, friends, because we know a lot of times men like Elon Musk don't really have friends. They have employees who pretend to be their friends, right? Nothing about his life has changed, and he is, by all accounts, the villain. So if he can be the villain and nothing really stops or shifts in his life, why can't you? Maybe being the villain, hold your hats here now, maybe being the villain will elevate your life. You ever thought about that? Maybe being the villain elevates your life. Maybe being the villain gives you time to pour into yourself instead of pouring into everybody else. So as we get ready to go to this commercial break, I want you to think about this. I want you to have this answer for me when we come back. Why are you afraid of being the villain? I'll see you after the break.
Hey y'all, it's Nicole D. Vick from Nicole D. Vick Live, and you're watching Pyro Media Network.
Hey, it's Pastor Kim from It's Just Kim Live Show, and you're watching Pyro Media Network.
Welcome back to the show. Okay, so before we went to commercial, I asked you to think about this question. What would happen if you were the villain? What would happen if you said no? What is the worst that can happen to you? And I want you to think about what is the best that can happen to you. Now, right before the break, what I said was sometimes being the villain in somebody else's story is a way for you to elevate your own life. Especially if the reason why you're being the villain is because you're setting boundaries around your time, around your gifts, around your talent. Because when we overextend ourselves for other people, we leave ourselves feeling depleted, lost, exhausted, right? And so we don't have the time to pour into ourselves. I was at a function earlier today, and in the room, the conversation was about, I was doing a keynote speaking event, and I talked to the room about empathy. It was a women's event, and I was having a conversation with the women in the room. And I said to them, what I have noticed as a consultant that works with companies and primarily with a lot of women leaders is that the thing that makes women a threat in the workplace, that gives women their edge at work, the thing that makes women powerful, the thing that makes women good leaders is the thing they leave at the door. And what they leave at the door in their workplace is their empathy. Because what they believe is that to have empathy, to be empathetic, is to be soft, to be seen as weak, and it leaves them open to being taken advantage of. And so they have made the decision, as women in the workplace, women in family, women in the friendship dynamics, however that manifests for you. They've made the decision to leave empathy at the door and to engage in work and engage in leadership and engage in managing people the way men do, right? Men tend to be very frank, very curt, very direct. The problem with that is men don't often get painted as the villain in the workplace. When they are direct, when they are curt, when they are frank, right? They're seen to be strong, decisive, right? They're seen to be good leaders when they have these qualities. But when you take those same qualities and you place them on women, women are labeled bees in the workplace. They're labeled difficult. They're labeled people nobody wants to work with and work under. And part of the reason why women do this, the reason why they actually set themselves up or allow themselves to be villains in the workplace. So they will park their empathy at the door. They're fine with being the villains, because if that means that if you think I'm a B, you won't ask me for the extra time off. If you think I'm a B, you're not going to take advantage of my kindness. If you think I'm a B, you're not going to ask me for the extra things that workers will tend to ask their bosses for. So they sign up to be villains in their workplaces. They sign up to be villains in their departments, sign up to be villains in their organization. And in that room was a bunch of women who felt awful for being the villains. Now, my question to them is, if you've made the conscious decision that you cannot have empathy, because a lot of women, a lot of people confuse empathy for being nice. Not even in the same room. Empathy and nice don't even exist in the same room. But for a lot of people, they believe to have empathy is to be nice. And so when I was having the conversation, I said, if you don't have boundaries around your empathy, you will be abused. You will be abused every single time if you do not know how to put boundaries around your empathy. So I'm in this room with all of these women leaders, CEOs, right? I was in the room with the CEO of one of the most major hospitals systems in Miami-Dade County. The CEO is in the room with me. And she said to me, she said, I struggle with this because I feel like people will take advantage. But I also struggle with people seeing me as a bad person, right? That's a double-edged sword of when you decide you're going to be the villain, right? Because sometimes we're the villain in people's stories and we didn't cast ourselves in that role. And sometimes we cast ourselves in these roles. And I said, why do you think that having empathy means you have to be nice? Do you have boundaries around your empathy? And if you have boundaries around your empathy and your boundaries translate to the people who come up against those boundaries that you won't move from, if that translates that you are the villain, why are you not comfortable with that? Why are you not okay with being the villain? So are they coming up against your boundaries, or have you casted yourself in the role as villain to kind of protect yourself in the workplace? Because sometimes that's what we do. Sometimes we're cast in roles based on past behaviors that people are never going to let us out of that box. It doesn't matter what we do. We could feed the children. We could feed all the animals. We could live a life 20 years clean. And people say, well, I'm glad she did that. But let me tell you what she did to me. That doesn't change what she did to me. That doesn't change what he did to me. What she did ruined my life. What he did ruined my life. Will Akira ever look back at Brene, even if Brene was, opened up an orphanage, even if she was doing soup kitchens, do you think she will ever look back at Brene and say, she's doing a lot of good things for the community and that's wonderful, but this is what she did to my life. I'm glad she helped you in yours, but let me tell you how she ruined mine. So sometimes the people who have cast us in the role of villain there's no getting out of that role. There's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do that will shift it for those people. And you have to be okay with that, right? Then there are the people that bucked up against our boundaries and bucked up against our no. And that alone has made us the villain for them. Okay. But sometimes we cast ourselves in the role of villain. And sometimes we do that consciously and sometimes we do that unconsciously. I think a lot of the women leaders that I was in that room with, a lot of them unconsciously casted themselves in that role because they believe that being the villain in the workplace keeps them safer than being the empathetic boss, than being the kind boss, than being the boss that has understanding and care, because they have not set boundaries around their empathy. And so people have abused it. People have walked over them. People have trespassed them. So their response to how they were treated when they were kind, when they were nice, when they were empathetic, was to feel abused. And so they cast themselves in the role of villain. Because some of you have casted yourself in the role of villain. And listen, if you're comfortable with the casting decision that you have made for your life, I'm comfortable with you. I think that's a good thing. But I wanted to do this show because I want people to be okay with being the villain. Because once you make peace with that, however you got into the role of villain, whether you placed yourself there to protect your kindness, to protect your job, to protect your home, to protect your kids. Because sometimes you're the villain. You're the mean soccer mom. But them coaches know not to play with your kid. Yeah, right? You are the main, we all have the mean saint. But everybody know when Sunday come, you better not be sitting in Sister Carol's seat. It ain't going to be nice for you, right? So sometimes we make a conscious decision to cast ourselves as villain. And when you make the decision to cast yourself, you have to be okay. You have to be okay. If you have been placed in the role of villain because you have set boundaries, you have to be okay. And if you are in the role of villain because you actually were the villain, you have to be okay. And once you make peace with that, you can go on and do all the other things you want to do in your life. You're not chasing your tail. You're not chasing the ghost of being seen as a bad person, chasing the ghost of being seen as the unkind person, chasing the ghost of being seen as the person who always says no. Because once you accept, I'm the villain and I'm okay with that, there's nothing anybody can do with you then. They can't manipulate you into being something you don't want to be. They can't coerce you into doing anything you don't want to do, because they know, well, listen, now we're going to ask Tammy, we're going to extend the invite, but we know she don't really like coming to this place. She don't like, I've said this before, I live in the Florida area and I live in the Fort Lauderdale area. I do not go to Miami. And if I ever come to Miami, please understand you are loved beyond measure. So there are times where people want to invite me to things that may be in Miami, and they'll say, listen, girl, we was going to invite you, but we know it was in Miami and you ain't coming. And sometimes those people are disappointed by my decision not to come. They are. And they will express disappointment that I won't make the drive to Miami or I won't come into the city. They're disappointed, but they understand that that's a boundary. That's a boundary. Now, if they all get to Miami and they're sitting at the bar and making me the villain for being unreasonable, for deciding I won't come to a whole city, I have made peace with that. I'm okay with that. I'm not coming. I'm not coming, sis. And if I have to be the villain, don't listen. I've told family and friends, if you get married and it's in Miami, don't bother sending the wedding invite. Now, there's going to be some people like, oh my God, you could go for some. No, that is my boundary. That is my boundary. So if I show up to something in Miami, I was supposed to be there. I had to be there. There was no way around being there. And if I show up not having to be in Miami, please understand that there's a depth of love and respect I have for you, and what it is you're doing or what you're trying to accomplish, and I want to be present. And now you may not get that from me every time, right? So if you got 10 events in Miami and I decide to show up for one because I love and respect you, please know the other 9, Tammy will not be there. She ain't coming. She ain't coming. And so because I am comfortable that for some people, that makes me the villain. For some people, that makes me the villain. And I'm okay with that. And so whatever you are, wherever you are in your life, whether you're the villain because setting boundaries make you the villain, if you're the villain because you did some things that made you the villain, or you consciously or unconsciously set yourself up, casted yourself in the role of villain, you got to be okay with that. Got to be okay with that. And so be the villain. Be the villain. But be the villain that leads with empathy for yourself first and then everybody else. Because one thing I do is that I lead with empathy for me first. So what I said to the women in that room, and I'm in a room full with 95% white women. So I started my keynote speech, and I started my keynote speech talking about why I may be the villain for them. And you know why I may be the villain for them? I talked to them about my book, The Empathy Gap It Is Black and White. And in that book, I talk very frankly and very matter-of-factly about the issue of race between Black people and white people. And listen, people kind of like did this in their chair. Now they went to Amazon and bought this book. Now, when they read this book, it isn't pretty. It isn't curated for an audience so that nobody is offended, but none of the hard things are touched. That's not what this book is about. It gets real, it gets frank, and it gets honest. And the second thing I said to them, and I said, if you don't know where you sit in empathy, I created a tool for you. It's called the Empathy Scorecard and the Self-Empathy Scorecard. Because people think they have empathy, but they may not. So within the first 5 minutes of my speech, I gave them the tool, my scorecards, and I told them about my book. And if you've ever been in a space with a majority white audience, you understand how simply talking about race, when we're all supposed to be there for women empowerment, and I come in and say, yeah, but there's some stuff between us women, between some of us Black women and some of us white women, and we have to address it if we really want to empower all women. And you can start by getting the book. You can start by doing your scorecards. And so, they said I did a great job. They clapped, they applaud. But was I okay being the villain and having a conversation that needs to be had that's very frank on the issue of race around women in the workplace, women leadership? Yes. And I'm okay. And you have to be okay with being the villain. Because sometimes being the villain is the thing that frees you more than not being the villain.
Thank you for watching Pyro Media Network. For more information, please visit pyromedianetwork.com.